Welcome back, friends, to Build a Lot of Acres. It's a cold November day, and in today's video, we're going to be discussing
what are all of the important things you need to know to get your tractor ready for winter snow removal.
Alright, so today's video is going to be geared mostly towards garden tractors because that's what we're really pretty passionate about. But these principles could apply to pretty much any tractor.
Yeah, like all the stuff we talk about, if you own something the size of the Ford or even say the size of the Coyote, it's still going to apply to you. It's not going to be any different. It's just going to be on a larger scale.
So there's really two key things you need to make your tractor perform at the optimal level, whether that be snow blowing or snow plowing. What do you think those two things might be?
I think the main one is that your tractor is weighted down properly. And so let's get into that first. So obviously there are wheel weights. Wheel weights are wonderful. We use them all the time. Wheel weights can be plastic, they can be concrete and plastic, which is what they normally are. They can even be like cast iron or steel. And these typically go on the rear tires, however they can also go on the front tires. And they're really good for offsetting a lot of the extra weight and putting weight on the tires, which is where it really matters.
But I think there is one problem with the wheel weights. They work great, but there's only so much weight you're going to fit on a little 12-inch rim in the rear tires of these garden tractors. Therefore, I would recommend, and I think Brett would agree, you really need to do a couple different weighting options other than just wheel weights if you really want to get that maximum weight. Because the rear end of these tractors, the transaxles, can really handle a lot more weight than those wheel weights are ever going to weigh. Most of them can handle, I'm going to say, in the 1,000 to 1,500 pound range before you start getting breakage and failures. Your wheel weights might weigh 25 pounds, 50 pounds, you're going to be lucky to get 100 pounds per side unless you want them sticking way up past the tires, and then you're going to run into issues with other things. So I think another great option to weigh down the rear of your tractor would be
to have a weight box or some sort of weights in the back behind the rear seat and all of that. So on my tractor, we have two 50-pound discs that sit on the back. My father's had multiple tractors where he puts like either a weight box or he's had some where he puts just a big concrete block on the back, ranging anywhere from what I'd say probably 60 pounds to I think 95, 150.
Yeah, depending on the size of the block.
And so that's another really, really, really good way to do it. But there's a third way that we've yet to mention, which I think is probably the most important, and that is ballast in the tires.
Now that could be a number of things. That could be windshield washer fluid that's rated to a low temperature. It could be rim guard, or sometimes you'll see it called beet juice. It could be calcium chloride, which I wouldn't recommend due to the corrosiveness of it. And if you do spring a leak, you're going to have bad chemicals going all over the place. But there's a number of different things you could put in your tires to get them to weigh down. So typically you're going to want to fill your tires to about 75 to 80% full, and you're going to want to leave a little bit of air at the top. Now it's very easy to fill up your tires with fluid. You can do it yourself. Maybe in the future I'll show videos on that if you guys are interested. I use a little pump and a little short section of garden hose and then an air valve that I connect onto the stem, and you can pump the fluid right in through that valve stem once you remove the core. So I think, staying in the weight topic, I think the first way should be your tires, because once you start adding rear weight, it's going to act like a fulcrum, and you're going to put more stress in that rear end and the axle. So the first thing would be the tires, because that's where you want the weight pushing down. You want those tires to grip right in on the ground and get good traction, which is going to be the next thing we're going to talk about. So I would say wheel weights, tire fluid would be the first two options, and if you can't get enough weight with those two, then you can go to the rear weight.
Yes.
So once weight is factored in and accounted for, what's the next thing you really need?
Traction. And there are two ways to do this. You can either A, get an aggressive tread tire, or B, use tire chains. And there are a lot of things to take into account here, with the main one being what type of driveway you have. If you have something like gravel or dirt, it's going to be a lot different than pavement. And that's because chains typically leave marks on paved driveways. So it's less optimal for you to use them if you have a paved driveway. Now, we have plenty of both. However, I would say for us that aggressive treads are the preferred method. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I've used chains a lot in the past. There's different types of chains. You have 2-link chains, which means there's a cross member every other link. There's 4-link, which has half as many cross members, so you have much more tires hitting the ground versus chains. So the 2 links are going to be better. You also have V-bar chains, which have little studs welded onto the chains, which are really aggressive. I wouldn't recommend those for paved driveways, but if you have a really steep driveway or if you have gravel, then you might want to consider getting something like a V-bar chain for your tractor. But the chains have their negatives too. You have to install them, they can be a pain, they can come loose, they can rub the fenders. There's a lot of things about the chains that I don't like, which is why I mainly just use weight and tire type, because my driveway is fairly flat, and I've found over the years that I can really get away with not really needing chains on my garden tractors.
Yeah, same with us. At my house, again, my driveway is definitely more hilly than yours, but it isn't terrible. And I've also found that I can get away just fine with just using aggressive tread tires and a lot of weight.
So I think those are really the biggest 2 factors determining whether or not your tractor is going to do good in snow removal is going to be weight and traction. So what else is there, Brett? We got weight, traction. Is there anything else people really need to consider doing or performing to their tractors to make them perform optimally with snow removal?
Something that I feel a lot of people skip out on, but you really need to do, it's really important, is to make sure you have a winter weight oil. This is crucial. The oil you use for the summer and the oil you use for the winter should be 2 different weights. You're gonna want a thicker oil in the summer because it's hotter, so it'll run fine with it, and it's gonna be less likely to just like evaporate, so to speak. But you're gonna want a thinner oil in the winter because it's a lot less likely to freeze.
And it's much easier to start.
Yes, it is also a lot easier to start. I've tried starting tractors with thick oil in the winter. Do not recommend.
Right, so I think that's a great point. I think there's one other thing we need to discuss, and that's going to be your implement. Whether you're using a snow plow, a snow blower, snow thrower, there is a difference from blower to thrower. We'll get into that maybe in another video, but no matter your implement of choice for snow removal, you want to make sure that it's running properly, and you want to make sure that your paint is nice and fresh and clean. If you have an implement that's rusty and has rough spots or flaking paint, you're not going to get optimal performance. The snow is not going to slide across it easily. It's going to get stuck to it, and you're going to end up with buildup and issues down the road. So I would say you want to make sure that your implement has fresh coat of paint on it. I personally like to go through my implements in the summertime, make sure everything's working, make sure they're nice and clean, painted, etc., etc. And you can also use a number of different products on that fresh paint to give it a nice slippery surface. You can use lithium grease, you could use car wax, they make different sprays you could use. There's a lot of things that you could do. I've seen people use like Pam cooking spray. There's a lot of things you can spray on that to make it even slipperier so that the snow slides right across like a summertime slip and slide.
That is one thing I do have to recommend, is that as someone who has used a plow on a garden tractor for numerous years, anything that makes it slicker will help. And I know that from all the times that I have been plowing with my tractor and I've just had build up and build up and build up on the front because I didn't spray Pam cooking spray on there. That's all we use, but that's all you need.
So I hope these tips and tricks are going to help you this winter with your snow removal. If you want some more content like this, please leave comments below, and we will
See you in the next one. Take care, everybody.